mainly focusing on war-affected children and gender violence and conflict and crisis. I had written a book on child soldiers in 2005, and then had begun working on a book about sexual violence or rape as a weapon of war conflict, places like Congo and Haiti and Colombia, Afghanistan. And, in the process of working on that book, I was led to creating this initiative, which became Man Up. Well, Man Up, I describe Man Up as a movement. My vision was that it would be a global campaign or a global initiative to educate, to mobilize, to educate, to engage young people, young men and young women collaboratively, working together to address forms of gender-based violence against women and girls in the community. So it could be domestic violence, intimate partner violence, trafficking, rape and war, female circumcision, corrective rape, whatever those youth decided was the most pervasive and pernicious form of gender violence in the community. Man Up was formed to support them addressing that violence, as well as raising awareness about um, gender-based violence and inequality amongst their peers. I think the pivotal moment was actually the year before I started Man Up, Veronica. Like I said, I was a journalist for many years, mainly writing for magazines, but some also newspapers. And I was spending a lot of time in the Eastern Congo, talking, writing profiles, writing essays and news articles about, the rampant sexual violence happening in Eastern Congo. And, it was on one particular trip in October of 2008 where it was a very profound trip, Veronica, where, I met a number of rape survivors, women
Mm.
whose stories really just, you know, transformed my life hearing them and meeting these women. One story in particular which changed me was a woman I met in a community called Kisangani, which is in northeastern Congo. And she was a young woman in her early 20s who had been gang raped and whose family had been killed in front of her. And I met her at a women's shelter in this community of Kisangani, and spending an afternoon with this woman, interviewing her, filming her story, documenting her journey. Um, it just really it shook me, it traumatized me really, but
Mm.
hearing the brutality of what she had endured compelled me to walk away from journalism and start, instead of writing about and being a bystander to these issues, this issue of gender violence against women and girls. Really, it was her story that was the catalyst for me deciding to move away from journalism to activism. I think the issue of violence against women has become more of a global focus, not necessarily because of Man Up specifically, but I think Man Up and a number of organizations, once you're working on this issue with different approaches for the past several years, I think our efforts, our advocacy, our speaking out, our mobilization of men and boys has had an impact. I think there's more attention paid to the fact that violence against women and girls is really not a women's issue. It's a human rights issue,
Mm-hmm.
and it affects men and boys as well. It affects all of us. So men, we have to be invested in standing up with women to address this problem. I think young
Mm.
people understand better than the older adults, um, the possibilities. That I think this millennial generation, is not bound by the same limitations of imagination or ingenuity the prior one was. Keep your head up. It gets easier. Um, Stay true to yourself. Um, you know, Stay focused. I say all the time that every person is born with inherent power, with inherent possibility to affect change, uh, to have moments of leadership and inspiration. Not everyone's a leader, but we all have the capacity to be leaders and change makers at certain moments in our lives. And that I tell every young person I meet, regardless of how old you are, whether you're still in school, just out of school, rich, poor, privilege, disadvantage, everyone has an inherent capacity to affect change and exert that inherent power, and that it's a choice not to do that. It's a choice not to fulfill that possibility within yourself, and that at certain point, you will be called to stand up. You will be called to to use that inherent power to affect some kind of change. And I encourage young people wherever I go to answer that call. That call may not come when it's convenient. But when it comes, be ready to stand up and do something.